Truth Talks. Please, I'm excited about the Truth Talks. They are addressing true fellowship and what it means, what true fellowship and corporate worship looks like according to the Bible.
I will sing to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown.
Good evening, everyone. How y'all doing tonight?
Fine.
Good. Well, we was, as they say previously in Joshua. No, you know how when you pick up a story or you go back to your favorite show and it kind of ended at a point, you're like, man, I can't wait to see what happened next week. So I had the pleasure of getting the script early and able to review it. And I believe that everyone should have had an opportunity to review the script. So we should all know what's coming up and what's going to be said. But let's continue off where we left off. And last week we left off with Joshua and his men and their feet on the foot or their feet on the neck of the 5 kings. Mm-hmm. And then he hung them. And after he hung them on a tree. But it was something specific after he hung them on a tree. What did they do?
They put him down.
They took him down and they buried him.
They put him back in the cave they were.
And they put him back in the cave. You want to hide there? Well, you're going to come out, face your punishment, and go back into your place of hiding. And
He took them down according to the law, so they put him in there overnight.
Right.
Yeah, Joshua did that with other kings too. He made sure he took them down before. Right.
Because of the curse be hanging on to.
Yep. And that's very significant because we do know that it said, "Cursed is the man that hangs on the tree." Right. Mm-hmm. And we learned we're getting ready to start seeing as we cut through here. We're going to kind of speed through some areas, not speeding through because we're neglecting the scriptures, speeding through because we're talking about Joshua and his conquest. And it's almost like a greatest hits. It was like took down this king, took down that land, took down this land, took down that king. And a lot of it is significant as the promise being fulfilled. It's also showing you how much God was actually taking in the land of Canaan. Well, not even taking, returning, because that is whose land?
God's land.
God's land. So it was promised to Abraham's descendants.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't a hostile takeover. Some people might see Joshua as this book is a hostile takeover. They're going to a land and total annihilation. You hear people always say, how could God be a God of, killing and this? Well, I mean, if somebody came, and I always tell them, somebody came in your house, took something from you, you got a right to take it back. It's yours. But in this case, it's God's land. So how he take it back is how according to how he does in the scriptures. And then Joshua, we start at 10:28 through 48. And if you notice, the scriptures are going to be very long, but I try to pull out some of the key notes outside from the battles. So, and the beating goes on. So after the 5 kings, it was almost like, okay, we have more land to conquest. We have more land to go through. So they were coming up through southern Canaan, and they was continuously pushing on for the war. They were taking down other ites, as they say, Amorites, Hittites. They was just taking all the ites out of the picture. But then at some point, the word is starting to get around about Israel. The word is starting to go amongst all the other nations, and the other nations are saying, Israel's winning. And not only are they winning, they're like totally annihilating everybody. So what did they do? People said, I'm gonna call this group over here and I'm gonna go help this person. And when they came to help, it was Giza, right? Giza came to help. They came to assist. Mm-hmm. And when they came to help, guess what happened to them? They got mollywopped too. So at the end of the day, even the people who decided to stand against Israel met the same fate. But they was gonna meet it anyway. They just basically rushed into it. Anything else anybody got before I touch on that last part?
You said anyone that stand against Israel is actually standing against who?
God. Because at the end, Joshua was just doing what he was told. Mm-hmm. He was maintaining that obedience. So at the end of all of it, when they finished the conquest and they were settling in, they won. The land was won. Total annihilation. So they had time. They didn't have to rush and say, as we win, we set up. It was something that I learned when I went to war the first time, and it was called leapfrogging. And I was always keen to questioning my commanders what was going on. Like, how is this war? How are we winning? How is it done? And he explained to him, he said, as the fight goes on, we leapfrog. And what will happen is as you would get one victory, another unit behind it will go around it and they would get a victory. And a unit behind it will go around it and they would get a victory. And it would keep going. But eventually, everybody after the victory was won will go back to the base. They will regroup, they will reaccommodate, they would do everything they needed to do to win. But they didn't stay on the battlefield just to say, let's hold and maintain, because the conflict was over. Now they needed to go and regroup. And that's what Joshua did. He said, let's go home. And they all went back to Gilgal. And if you notice, and I mentioned last week, what did I say about Gilgal?
Around.
Right?
Yeah.
But when you look at through the scriptures, they always go back to this place. Something is always happening here. As you go and you dig further into your scriptures, you'll start to see a lot of stuff. So this is a place that even though they're conquesting forward, they still go back, because what's there at Gilgal?
The stones?
The stones. So if I can't do anything else after a while, I'm gonna go back to where I remember.
Right.
You know, if I even though I'm conquesting and I'm winning wars, I still want to go back to where my first victory was. And we do. Pastor Mari told us about that first victory. The first victory in the war. The battle speech he gave Joshua, be strong, be strong, be strong. He was telling Joshua to be strong because he knew what land he was going to, but he also had to tell him to be strong because I'm getting ready to part the water and y'all gonna walk through it. That's victory number one. So why not always, after we have conquest and won, to go back to a place where our victory is?
The first victory.
The first victory.
Mm-hmm.
So as they push through, they go back, and then any questions about that particular section? Because we can roll into 11:10. And as you notice, I have up there war and inheritance. These whole chapters are war and inheritance. They're going to talk about the division of the land. They're going to talk about the battles that took place prior to that division of land. You're going to see how as the tribes start to get their victory, now they have to start proportioning the land as it was promised to them. You're going to see people going to come up and they're going to say, hey, remember this? When we were down in the desert, it was a deal made. It was something struck. Mm-hmm. I'm owed that. And Joshua, he wasn't a deal maker, but because God, Moses, Joshua, he honored it because he was commanded to. And these are big impactful situations that are happening here that reflects so far down when we hear into the gospel of Jesus Christ. Even the land, the way the land was being divided, if you understand how the land was being divided, you see how that when Jesus was going around, he was touching some of the same places that the land had already been victorious, because that's where the sheep were. What did God call his land, or his land? He always refers to us as sheep, and that is his what? Or farmer? Pasture.
Right.
His pasture. The sheepfold. This is his land. So when Jesus said, I come to get those lost sheep, he's talking about the people in that land. And it was the tribes that were in dispersion. But also we learned that further on that Jesus also came to get other nations. Just like it was other nations, that even though the war was going on, you started to see other nations that were joined up with Israel. You'll hear that. You'll hear that in a conquest. All right. So next we have any additions? If I'm rolling too fast, war is quick. So as other kings, they started to team up. Just like the past five, I guess that they didn't get the memo. So other kings said, you know what? Them past five kings, they must have did something wrong. They have to be flawed. It is no way that those five kings took out armies that could be numbered like the grains of sand. They had to do something wrong. So the other five kings, they decided that, or the other king said, hey, we're going to get together and we're going to win. We have victory. It has to be possible. And God actually told Joshua, don't worry about it. I got you. Paraphrase. But that confidence he gave him, he said, go and win. But I got something else I want you to do while you're out there. Now, if you notice, the battle, the missions, the results are starting to change a little bit. First battle, total annihilation, wipe everybody out. They took gold. The gold was supposed to go to the temples, but what they did is they took stuff, spoils from when they wasn't supposed to. Second time they went out, they were able to take sheep, livestock, different things. As they go out now, God is saying, okay, now I have more that I want you to do. And he tells Joshua, hamstring the horses. Now, when I first read this many moons ago, I had to learn what hamstringing a horse was. What was the purpose of hamstringing a horse? Why would you do it? Like, what was the reason for doing these things? Hamstringing a horse is this. The horse has a tendon. Now, I knew what a hamstring was, but the horse has a tendon. And what they would do to stop the horse from being capable in battle, they would cut the back of the horse leg, which makes the horse crippled and incapable of any fight at all. Which, if you're doing this to the largest part of their armies, it's diminishing to a fighting force. A large force coming upon you, he gave it. Then you know what else he said? And why are you hamstringing the horses? Go ahead and burn the chariots. Yeah. So he took out the horses. Go ahead.
No, it's the same thing that you do, even on a person. If you mess with Achilles, you mess them up. They're crippled basically from that part. It's a hamstring. Now, the kings that you're dealing with here is in the northern kingdom, right?
I think this is conquest of the southern kingdom, but
the southern kingdom was already conquered.
North.
10 was southern kingdom was already conquered, right?
Yeah, you're north. We're up north now.
Now in northern kingdom, now they got the other ones, think they can do everything better than the southern kingdom.
They come with a different fight. And once the battle start, these were the orders. Joshua fulfilled his orders to the letter. He still had the order of total annihilation, eliminate all in the land. Now, we do know that a while back that there was deception amongst that came amongst the Israelites. We had two nations, a nation that snuck up and said, hey, we're poor, we come from a long distance, we got old wineskin and old clothes, please show us favor. So that one kind of got in, but we also know the results of that deception. They became servants. Now, as we see this conquest, we still know it's total annihilation. And I say, well, not total, because if you notice in the scriptures, in 11 through 23, there is talked about two tribes that were sojourning with them. Now, the word sojourning, when you see it, anybody know what the word sojourning, what it indicates to? Or stranger in some books.
Foreigner.
It's just the foreigner.
Foreigner.
But the sojourners were also considered Gentiles, other nations that were counted amongst the Israelites. They weren't looked at as less. In fact, the sojourner had the same rights as the Israelite. And also at times they had to be treated better, because this is somebody we took in the midst of travel, battle, conflict, whatever it is. So these people come in, they learn our ways, and now they're with us. But they made sure that they were careful not to let certain people in. And that's the lesson learned from that tribe that snuck down there and deceived them. You have to be careful when a stranger comes amongst you to join in your cause, because you never know, but we still treat them with kindness when they come in, just as the Israelites did. All right. So total annihilation, everything was gone. They was wiping through northern Canaan. And Joshua said, I've done my 12 and 12. Remember what 12 and 12 is? It's the stones, right? But what do they represent? Remembrance and what? Obedience. And Joshua said, I've done my 12 and 12. I did what I was supposed to. I remember what the Lord told me to, and I was obedient. And as he was fighting through after hamstringing the horses and getting kind of to that last little ball of a fight, he realized, the scriptures tell us, that nobody wanted peace. And a conquest, knowing that, this is just my brain. This is a PDism, as I call it. If I saw somebody coming from Richlands and they was annihilating everything going down, and I knew they had God on their side, it's just me. At some point, I might say, I want peace. But when you think of that, you say, yeah, why didn't I want peace? Because God, once again, he answers, I don't want peace, because it wasn't put in their hearts. Then of course they wouldn't want peace. But it's just a reminder to tell us that when the conquest of the Lord is going on, there are going to be people that don't want peace. It speaks of that in Revelation. It's just going to be people who don't want peace. So guess what's going to happen? They're going to be annihilated. And if you know the pattern of your enemy, you know the pattern of war, you know the pattern of victory and how it goes, then just like Joshua, you don't have to labor in thought over your enemy. So long fights, no peace. And then eventually there was victory. After annihilation, after taking them all out, there was victory. And that's when Joshua said, okay, it's been a while. We've been fighting. We have victory. It's time to start talking about the portions of the land. The war is behind us. Now it's time to talk about your portions and rest. Now, the word rest, when I went back and look at it, you see a lot of it, and I hear it. I've heard it a lot coming up in the church. And nobody ever explained what rest was to me. They said rest. I thought it was just going to sleep. I thought it was, when they talk about if you die, you go to heaven. That's rest. But as I dug in and I really started to study, I seen that rest was associated with peace. Rest meaning God gave a perfect example of understanding rest when he gave it to King David. And then we have that same example right here. When David said, I want to build your temple. And he told David, he said, you will not build my temple because you are a man of war, but your son will because he is a man of rest, because there are no wars around him. So when Joshua got there in full victory and dividing a portion, and he had rest, it meant at that moment, there were no wars around Israel. God was fulfilling his promise to his people. He was giving them land. He was giving them peace. He was giving them rest. And then enter the people. And you start to see some of the things as the remnants of that 40-year scroll in the desert, the loss of the elders, the new generation of people, the land that's old, the things that how it needs to be divided. And you start to see some of those things come up. Now, they're not negative, but they are impactful in the history of the Israelites. They set a current and a motion to go forward. So even after he went back, they listed all in 12, 1 through 24. If you look up there, it says the 31 flavors of defeat. Because I was a big fan of ice cream. I still am. I love me a good scoop of ice cream. And Baskin Robbins had the 31 flavors? Have they updated yet, or we still got 31? They still got 31? Okay, see? And everybody got that. But these kings, when they had to list their greatest hits, it was 31 defeated. So it was a fitting title. 31 flavors of defeat. So now the Israelites are in their rest. And Joshua says something in this. I am old. Because you got to remember, when Joshua came in, he was a young fellow. When he's out there as a spy, he was full of vigor. Young fella. Now he's old. Old in age, yes, but also old in the mission. A lot of times when we hear these prophets and the old meaning just tired. I've done a lot, but also old meaning age. But you got to think, Joshua, up until that point where he said, I'm old. He's admitting that I've been through a lot. But he also said, we're not done. It's still things that as Israel, we have to do. We have to make sure this division goes well. I cannot stop doing the mission that God got. You got something there?
No, I was reading that. Not only Joshua said to himself, he was old, but the Lord told him he was old. Look, verse 1 and 13, right? It said, now Joshua was old, advancing in years. And the Lord said to him, you are old.
You are.
Advancing years. And there remains very much land yet to be possessed. In other words, you are old, but you ain't done.
Got things left to do. And Joshua in old age still had to go out and keep fighting.
And said, I think it's about 95 years old?
Was it 95?
Yeah, about 95 years old.
That's an old age to be out on the battlefield, man. And in our mindset today, a 95-year-old man on the battlefield fighting a war.
I was reading that, not only that, but some of the times they walk 25 miles.
To get there.
And I went on a 25-mile hump. It took us 8 hours, and I had blisters. But they would do that and then go right back and do it again. So not only God preserved their health that way, but even their feet and their clothing. I mean, you talking about moleskin. I had moleskin on. These guys didn't have that. And they walked those miles, and God just preserved his strength and day after day.
Now you talk about the miles they walk, is doing their 40 years, right? Plus what they had to do once they took possession of the land.
Oh, when they would conquer people and then
Right.
come back and go right back. I mean, he preserved their
The
health.
25 miles to get them, get there, fight them, and then come back,
Go back.
go back again.
So I'm a huge football fan. I like football. I played it for a little bit when I was in the Navy. And one of the things that a play that always struck me as odd, it was the sweep, a sweep play or a wide receiver sweep. Because it's one of the longest plays in football. Literally, like wide receiver starts over here on this side of the field. He runs from that side of the field, get the ball, runs, and then proceeds to run forward.
Mhm.
And I think about that often when you think about battle, conquest, anything that you do. A lot of times, it's not always a straightforward run. Sometimes it's an end around run to proceed forward. These fights, most likely, when you look at the history of how they conducted war, it wasn't as organized as we were. But when they conducted these wars, these fights took some of these steps. They took some of these different measures to get done. Remember, they marched around Jericho. Jericho wasn't small. Like, I mean, it was a lot of movement. And Joshua wasn't just moving by himself. He was moving and controlling armies, having them complete specific tasks. The hamstring of horses, the burning of chariots, that specific task. And you've seen what happened when people were, because we've seen disobedience from probably a battle array that went out and Joshua wasn't even aware of it. So we know that there was a lot of movement going on. And I always read the book of Joshua and I think that, yes, we talk about Joshua, but we see how the Lord was working in Joshua to command people to win a war. And so far, we've only lost 36 people. When you talk about the loss, now I went out on deployment, and one of our claim to fame was we took 309 people out. We came back with 309. A lot of units didn't have that success, but we did. And my CO, he got a nice little bronze star for it, but it was the fact that everybody went out and everybody came in. Joshua was doing that on a regular basis, taking all the men. Remember, these were the men of fighting age. He would take them out, conduct war, and come back. Can you imagine your loved ones? They all leave out, and you see them all come back. Last week Kim mentioned something that that one time, that betrayal, and they lost the war, for them to go out and to see 36 men not come back. That's 36 families that were without fathers. That's 36 families that now, according to the law of Deuteronomy, had to be taken in because they're orphans and widows, the ones that have to be looked at. So these are the things that, and we hear that mentioned later on in the scripture, right? Believe it's is it James or Jude? Who says I think it's
James.
James. The pure religion is to take care of widows and orphans because they don't have an inheritance. They don't have someone to redeem them. All right, so it's a lot about the conquest there. So Joshua, we know he's old, and I just have that old but not done because it goes back into the things that needed to be taken care of. Now, as they're moving along, any questions about those chapters? I'm rolling tonight. It's easy. I got such a great group of people. Y'all make it easy on me. Questions? Anything? Man, y'all make this too easy, man. That's a good thing. That's a beautiful thing, man. Look, y'all sure y'all want to tell me something? Anything I miss in these chapters?
We'll get you.
Okay. All right. So in chapter 13, 7 to 33, now we're starting to see a little bit of the inheritance and how the land is being divided. People are being told to stay put. Who's getting what. Now, remember, this is 12 tribes. And as these 12 tribes is being divided up, we have to remember one tribe has no portion.
Right. Levites.
And it made me, and if you mind me you don't mind, I'm gonna kind of go into a thought that I was thinking. When Jesus came and he died for us, He made us children of God, right? But he also said we came into the royal priesthood. And when we look and we think about it, he told us our inheritance. Our inheritance is the kingdom of heaven. Who we are. Now, I'm not saying we're tribal wise. It's more of a mind, more of a keep in mind. You know, how our faith is designed like how the Levites lived. How Jesus told us that don't worry in Matthew 5, we said, don't worry about clothes, food, and all that stuff. That's kind of how the message is for the Levites when you look at that portion. So I'm not saying that we're Levites in genealogy, but in mindset, being the priests and the children of God, we should look at our inheritance the same way the Levites looked at their inheritance.
Yeah, and actually, God was their portion.
God was there.
And so God is our portion. Now, not that that's typifying us out, but God was their portion. And so for us, it's not so much of something tangible. God is our inheritance. He's our portion.
Right. And if you can, and if you know, and I say that because I do have conversations with different people, and in the conversations, a lot of genealogy comes up, and it always leads me back to Titus. And Titus said, you know, don't get into a bunch of foolish quarrels about genealogy because it profits none. Right. It doesn't. If I was to sit here and say, I'm from this tribe and have no real proof of it, what does it profit? We just kind of go back and forth. Or if I say I'm from this and that, it leads to nothing. But a mindset, a spiritual way of thinking. I'm also studying Revelations. And I got to a part in Revelations and it talks about a spiritual mindset. When it talks about Egypt and Sodom, spiritually is what it said. It didn't say that they were like Egypt and Sodom is right here with us, but it said spiritually. So in my mind, if it could be a spiritual Sodom in Egypt, could it be a spiritual Levite way of thinking? So I started to see that message that Jesus was telling us about how we are children, how our priesthood, how our inheritance. And it gave me a greater understanding of God is my inheritance. And if I could see it from that point, not claiming Levi, just like when in Revelations, when he's our portion. So you now have a stake and a claim, even in Joshua, because when I said, the message here goes all the way to the end. And that's why when I look at the scriptures, I see it constantly going all together. Yet I know it's separate. I know the story of Joshua was actually a physical story of Joshua. I know that Joshua actually had a physical conquest. Historically, this happened. But I also know the spiritual side of it, how it goes forward and how it's in us and how we can relate. And that's why you get a lot of people who don't understand their inheritance. I see people say all the time, man, oh man, I can't wait to get my inheritance, because they're talking about things that are here, the opposite of what Jesus was saying. But you keep your eyes focused on the kingdom and focused on your true inheritance, and you can never lose, just like the Levites. And we do know that just like the Levites, they messed up in the past. They weren't perfect, but they got something better. That's what I said. Something important, something better. All right, that was me kind of just talking about a little something that was in my brain. Hopefully I didn't confuse anybody. All right. Whew, that was a wild tangent right there. Any questions about that? I know I'm kind of zooming through it. We're going to have a short night. We're going to be able to talk about something else. All right. So if I'm moving too fast, let me know. Okay. All right. So after that, they started to talk about the dividing of lands. You've seen how the 12 tribes were getting their portion. And in the midst of the 12 tribes getting their portion, they did exactly what the law said they have to do. Now, Joshua, even though Joshua was being led by God, God gave them the law. So he still was being led by God when he maintained the law, when he brought the priest and the 10 tribes in. Because that's how business was supposed to be done according to what God had already said prior to coming over. So Joshua, being obedient, maintaining that 12 and 12, because he don't already got hit once. He don't want to get hit again. And they talk about that later on. I don't know if I'm going to make it, where they talk about, hey, remember that tribe that was disobedient? We don't want to do that again. But Joshua came and he brought everybody else. And he said, okay, now we need to start doing as we were commanded. Who gets what piece? Where are they supposed to be? Now we also know that there's 2 tribes or half tribes,
2.5.
2.5, 2.5. They decided that we're going to help you with the fight, but we're going to stay on the other side.
But really, they didn't have no choice but to help with the fight.
This is true.
Basically.
They made it seem like they were
Right,
offering
right,
service.
right.
You know, and Joshua said, "You're not going to stay here. Y'all going to fight, and then if y'all want to go back." But even that has some ramifications later on down the line. In fact, it had ramifications right there with Joshua and a group. You could already see the problem starting. The infighting that elevated from tribes to villages to judges to full-blown kingdoms being all out disobedient. But God also gave them a reminder that those kings, those kingdoms that you warn against, they're your brothers and your sisters. And I hear it quite often in here. You know, most other pastors, they always say, might be different at the mother churches. Now, I'm paraphrasing here. I ain't gonna say who I'm quoting, how I'm quoting it. If you feel, as they say, hit dog holler. But it might be, it might be happening at the mother churches. But remember, they are brothers and sisters. Same concept. Same concept. Just because some people like to stay on the other side of the river, remember, they are brothers and sisters.
And why did they want to stay on the other side?
They did.
It was greener for them as they thought.
As they thought.
But later on, it turned brown on them. Go
They
ahead.
definitely did, because that wasn't the land that was promised to them. But it was given to them.
Mm-hmm.
Not promised, but still given, because God still loves his children.
Mm-hmm.
Even the ones who don't listen to what he's saying. He's still like, I'm not going to leave you out there. And that I'll never leave you and forsake you is right there. Like this whole book, it just ripples through the scriptures. And if you wanted to do this with Genesis, I feel the same way about Genesis. Just keep rippling through the scriptures. It's almost as if the beginning is the end and the end is the beginning. I once, said to somebody, I said, well, Jesus came as the great reset. Took us to something better than the garden, but we basically getting back to the garden. Oh man, how was that? I said, read Genesis. What? You want to read the end of the book about the beginning of the book? Yeah. You want to read the beginning of the book? Read that. Either way, it works. Can't lose. All right, so he got the priest. Now, as he was doing as he was commanded, there was a hey in the background. I always visualize when all these things are going, because when a division of anything is going on, everybody show up. I don't care if you were slicing a piece of cake in a conference room. Somebody can come and say, hey man, they slicing cake in there. And guess what somebody gonna say? Well, come on in here, everybody get your portion. No matter how big that cake is. And I watched it at countless going away parties. Somebody would bring a cake about this big and they'd be like, you got 30 people in the shop. And somehow they would cut that cake to a point where it was done. It still had some left
over.
I said, you fed 30 Marines and sailors off that little piece of cake, and you still got some left, and you would see somebody there. Normally it was either, that person in the shop, when we was young, that person had a family, or that person who just been around for a while, and he looked at you and said, got to make it last. Hey, I know they're hungry, but I got to give them their portion. Because if I give them too much, somebody gonna be left out. If I don't give them enough, you're gonna have infighting and arguing. So when I think of these crowds, I think of all those people there. And I hear a crowd, and I see the crowd, and Joshua is doing what he's doing. He's talking with the priest, and at the priest at that time was I always get the Elijah. There you go. Because them Elijahs, Elijah, Elisha, all of them. I said, man, that was a common name, man. So that was the priest at the time. So they were there. The tribal leaders were there, and everybody's there. And I see a big crowd. In my mind, I see a big crowd. And I hear it in the background. Hey! Joshua looking, the priest looking, the tribe leaders are looking. Hey! And they're looking around. I see somebody just keep jumping up with their hand up. And you know how they say when you're in the back and somebody jumps, oh, come on up here. And here comes somebody we haven't heard from or heard about in a long time. Caleb. And Caleb comes up. And Caleb says, when I was in the desert, and I was a spy with you. I went out, we did a mission, we did what we were supposed to do, and I came back. Even though my brother, he wasn't as faithful as I was. He didn't believe, I believe. And Moses made a promise. Can you imagine carrying around something for 40 years. And then, because I think at the time it was another 45 years, because 45 years passed, so that's a long time to carry that promise around. And then at the time, because you carrying around a promise, now this is the beauty and the faith of Caleb. He fought wars for a promise that he didn't know was going to come. He backed Joshua up, never stepped up and said, man, I'm fighting because I know I'm gonna get my promise. He did what he was told. But when the time came, the proper time for the division of the land, Caleb said, do you remember? I'm not throwing it in your face. I was faithful then and I'm faithful now. But do you remember what was promised to me? And it's a reason why Caleb is the one that it was promised to. Now, did anybody remember this promise back in when we
Numbers, back in Numbers.
in Numbers? It's a lot of things that slipped my mind. A promise to Caleb. The story is about Joshua, but Caleb got his feature. It's a prominent feature for a prominent reason, because Caleb is from a specific tribe. Anybody know what tribe Caleb is from?
Oh.
Go back, keep going back. You can go back, go back even further. So to help you out, when we talk about
Kenizzite.
tribe, just keep it to the 12.
Kenizzite.
Keep it to 12. And the Kenizites was from if you walk back, Caleb was from what tribe? Keep going back. Let's go back to the 12. If Caleb had to trace his lineage back to the 12, what tribe is he from?
Judah.
It's a reason
Judah.
that Caleb needed his portion. Caleb was from the tribe of Judah. Anybody else come from the tribe of Judah that holds any importance? Pretty much a lot of kings, a whole different kingdom that stood up that was so righteous that it was a promise made to a specific king that later on down the line that we had a certain king that came that was promised to us from the tribe of Judah. I mean, he saved a whole lot of people. He came from Judah. So, and if you look at the land that Caleb was given, it touched a lot of other lands. And they talk about that in the conquest, how it bordered this land, how it was connected to this land. It's funny how Judah was connected to every other part of the kingdom. Very, very interesting. The little things that I catch, it's like, man, that's a very interesting fact that had indications and ripples throughout the rest of the scriptures. So let's say Caleb never stepped up and said, can I get this land? He probably would have got his portion of land. Probably would have been small, probably would have just been over in the corner somewhere. Who knows? But the way God designed it, he got his land. Now, when Caleb got this land, he rested. Hey, I'm resting with the rest of y'all. I got my land, everything good, it's touching. The division kept going. And 15, 1 through 12, it even talks about how Edom bordered Judah. And we do know that the Edomites are spoken of throughout the scriptures, specifically in the end. And the Edomites had a specific thing because the Edomites were descendants of Esau. Man, it's all working out when you really look at it. And Esau pursued his brothers, and they talked about the Edomites. And when it came up to the fighting and everything else, and how Edom had that specific border over there, that you see things starting to unfold in the scriptures. Now, I also took another one, Hinnom, which means lamentation. But if you look at Ginnehim, it means the valley of sadness, or the valley of lamentation, or the valley of tears. And it's funny that valley is, Hinnom was a land in the back in that area. I'll have to pull up on a map one day and I think I do have a map and I can pass it around and show it to y'all. Give me a second after we're finished. So Caleb got a lot of space. I just put those two names out there kind of like to see how some of these places and names have specific names and titles. And as you go further into the scripture, you'll see how those names and titles have indication, and how as the transliteration and things got over, when you hear Genehimen or Sheol, it referenced hell, but it was actually an actual place in a division of the land. It was the lowland that eventually, where they started to discard the bodies, the different things that would happen when they had to uphold Mosaic law. So we see that, we see those places. But when studying and looking at it, and it's such a long list of things that's going on, a lot of people say, I don't know who that person is. That's a long, weird name. And what does that got to do with anything? And I just pulled those two names out just to kind of reference how it is important that when we read chapters like this or chapters like Chronicles, and you sitting there and you're like, man, this is a lot. Who begat who? Why begat, oh, begat. And you start to look, and then oh, that's the name I recognize. That's David. And then it gets down after that, and then David did it, and you're like, okay, I'm back to people I don't know again. It becomes that thing, and when you're looking at it, you're like, man, I don't know these names. But get to know them. Because they were important. They were so important that they were mentioned in a division of land. They were so important that it was mentioned in God's promise. Let me see what it means. So I looked up a lot of those names. I didn't want to labor y'all with all of them, but some of the names meant like lamentation, tears, and other ones meant like pavement, like Laban. That means like pavement. Like, so as basically that was a road. Like these are, it was very interesting to me. I don't know why I get my brain just be wanting to know stuff. All right, so, but even after they got into the space, there was a lot of space too. It was a whole lot of space they were covering. Caleb still had some things he needed to do. And as Caleb was conquesting going forward in 1512, we come across a part outside of conquest, almost like a story in a story. All right, so we've had Joshua's story. And as Joshua's story is continuous, imagine a timeline that's going in sequence with each other. We know Joshua is still working, but Caleb is doing something too. That land that Caleb got, is things in there in his land. Let's say little housekeeping he had to take care of. And to get there, and there was a woman. And Caleb already gave some land. And a woman said, well, if you gave me some land, how about you give me a well too? And he was generous. He was generous with his land. So that was Caleb's generosity. Anything else? I'm going too fast. Slow me down, because I erase the whole board and get to the rest of it. Because y'all don't understand, man. When it came to them promises, man, I love how Joshua was laying it down. Hey, this is that. You do this, we're gonna be good. You do that, and then he gets to the end. He just say, "Hey, as for me and my house," that is the most beautiful thing after conquest, because it's the understanding. And I know I'm ahead, and it's the other things that I want to answer in there, but as the conquest went on and you get to see the end, I know I'm telling you the end of the story. Y'all got the same script I got. So if y'all want to get to the end of the story, it's there. But in the conquest, he got to the end of things. And at the end of all things, good, bad, or indifferent, you follow this, you follow that, these are the things that's going to come on you. He laid it out. He said, I don't know what y'all going to do. What I'm going to do is serve the Lord. That's cut and dry. I mean, if you want to have a mic drop after, like, the battles itself could have been a mic drop. But an old man, because Joshua was old when he did that. Wars was behind him. The best time to give people a good message is now, because this is rest. There's nobody pursuing Christians. There's nobody, beating us down, killing us for passing the message. Nobody was beating them down. Nobody was beating Israel down. This is the time to give that message. We at peace. Because I'm going to tell you like this, I ain't going to be here for the war. So you better take, like Joshua said, you better take this message in peace. Because after this, and I say it this in a sense, after this chapter of the Bible, you will see your decisions and how they weigh on y'all. But Joshua being Joshua, Caleb being Caleb, things are going on. And as you see, the land is still being divided up. All right. Joshua had a few issues that people that got away, but they weren't in the land, but they were close. And I believe it was the Philistines, right? Mm-hmm. Man, the Philistines? But most people don't learn about the Philistines until when? David and Goliath. Mm-hmm. And it's a shame, because you think that the Philistines were some mystical group of people that just rolled up and wanted to start a fight with Israel. They've been right there next door the whole time. They had a purpose. Because I tell you this, if God wanted to annihilate them too, we wouldn't have had a David and Goliath. But it's a reason for everything and how it progresses in the scriptures. And as it progressed, you see those progressions. Philistines was right there. And guess who they was right there next to? Caleb. And guess what was happening in an area where Caleb, who was probably long gone, I'm for sure of it, years down the line, something happened in that land. Philistine came against Israel.
Mhm.
And when they came against Israel, well, they had Israel shocked and stunned and whatnot to fight. And just so happened, it was in the land of Judah. Because it was pretty close, because David had to be somewhere around because his brothers was walking distance to bring food. Hey, David, what you doing down here being nosy? You don't do that just because it's, you know, I got to walk 10 miles to go be nosy, my brother. That's close enough to go see a fight. So we see that the Philistines had already been there. A lot of people hear about it when you talk about the judges. They're in there too. But when you hear the Philistines have been a thorn in Judah's particular hip for a long time. So we see that. That's important. It's important for studies later on. Keep in mind. So when you see the Philistines first time, you say, oh man, this is an old thorn that's been around. All right. So any questions? Did I leave anything out? Let me go back and check my notes. Man, I probably shouldn't be checking my notes because I have little magical note stuff in here too. Like I tell you, man, pour this stuff on. Pedisms, stuff to pour out my brain. So pardon me as I look back over my notes. I think I'm hitting all the points here to. Yep. All right. So now in chapter 16, 1 through 17 and 18. Now that right there is 16:1 to 17:18. It would have been a really long story to say, and this tribe got this, and that land was over here, and this tribe did that, and then they gave this, and they gave that, and that person got that, and that person got. I'm not telling you to forego that information. I'm telling you that Bible study would go a lot longer than we'd probably be here. We'd probably be here at Sunday service. Because there was a lot of land being given out, and there was a lot of tribes, and the division went down to the smallest member. It wasn't when they were dividing this land, they made sure, or as we say, God made sure that everybody had their portion. Even the ones who didn't want to go over, Ephraim and Manassas. You know, some Manassas up in Maryland, I drive by the sign all the time. Yes. My brain went off in the whole different. But so even that has implication. And I took those two names because we see that in Isaiah, he actually talks about Ephraim. He tells them, whoa, because Ephraim had the priests. And in that time, them priests was just out there just giving out bad messages. He called them drunks, actually. He called them drunks. And I hear this line stated a lot. And in one context, I understand what they're saying, but in another context, they always refer back to where he said line upon line, precept upon precept. And you hear people say, that's how you study, line upon line, precept upon precept. But you have to understand what that particular passage was about when it came to Ephraim. They were talking, and I'm talking about how the problem of their division caused problems later on. And it would be hard pressed of me just to say, well, Joshua was dividing up the land and I'll just leave it at that. Because if I can show you in Joshua how it affects other places, you'll start to see how these things all work together. So Ephraim they had their priests, and our priests were just half-cocked with the message. They were just doing it. They were just giving people a little here, line upon line, precept upon precept. And he said, and the Lord said, I will take you down the same way you preach, with line upon line, precept upon precept. So I think that's Isaiah 28.
Okay.
I believe so. I don't want to mention it without. So that has its own issues because they were the ones who wanted to stay. They didn't want to come across. They were comfortable after the war. They said, we're gonna go back across the east side of Jordan. But guess what still kind of touched it? Judah. It's funny, even when you try to escape to the other side of the river, Judah is still touch you. And Judah, they said the Lion of Judah will come They talked about the lion coming from Judah, and that lion was Jesus Christ. He came, rescued us. He just like by his love and his grace is to touch every one of us. He was doing it for the brother tribes there. So it all pans out in my mind. So there were some leftover Canaanites that were still there. They didn't, like I said, it wasn't the total annihilation happened to the kingdoms that God said go and totally annihilate. But there were remnants of other people. There were sojourners who joined up with them as the conquest goes. So we see that the total annihilation was destined for those who had took land that didn't belong to them. It is other history way back that the reason why they was getting mollywopped. And the more they brought, the more they got whopped. All right. So it was some leftover Canaanites. Any questions about 16:1 through 17:18? There's a whole lot in there. If you were reading in your studies, if you read something that I missed, talk about it. Take a quick break. All right, no breaks. I like it. All right. So 18:1 through 19:51, another long conquest. All right, I talked a little bit about Ephraim in there, and I talked about the leftover Canaanites. And here we see Joshua he's starting to have a little bit of concern. Joshua asks a question: how long y'all gonna wait? Like that land up there is we done. You know, it's the conquest is over. The conquest has proceeded forward. How long are we going to wait? I've already given Caleb, Ephraim, Manasseh, they got their spot. What's up with the rest of the tribes? When are y'all gonna move out? When y'all gonna do what y'all supposed to do? So guess what Joshua said? I got a little math for y'all. Joshua said, I love math. Remember we came over 12 stones in the river, 12 stones on land. You know, I like math. So Joshua said, here go a little bit of math for y'all. What's the math, Joshua? He said, pick 3 and divide it by 7. Whoa, what just happened? Said, pick 3 people from each tribe, send them out, let them survey the land, come back, tell me what's out there, and then divide it by 7. What? We got to do what? Everybody else, hey, look, and that's what I say. Judah spoke up at the right time. When that crowd was out there, he was one of the early birds. He said, man, they out here dividing stuff. Excuse me, there was a promise made to me. Is there a way we can settle up? I'll take that. Judah had it already planned out. But the rest of the tribes, they dragged. And it's very interesting that when you look at how the other tribes went about taking the land, you already see problems that ripple. So how the kingdoms were running haphazardly, kind of on the lazy side. We've done the job. I don't have to be proactive about my land. It's out there. It's out there from when I go get it. But God told them in the beginning, go and take your land. I didn't tell you to conquest the land and sit back and relax. Go and take your land. He said, go be fruitful and multiply. That was a command for them to do. So for them to sit back after the conquest was over was kind of like a slap in the face. This is your land. Why y'all still sitting here? To a point where Joshua said, you won't do it, I'll command. And they went and did it. All right. And even when they came back and they said divided by 7, Joshua said, well, since you did that, we're going to cast lots. Now, anybody know what casting lots is? It was a decision-making tool. Can you imagine you having all this land and somebody saying that you could have went out there and got it yourself? It was for you. It was already being divided up for you. I already talked about in that whole 16:1 through 17 how the division should go, and you sat there with your thumbs to a point where now somebody has to cast lots to see what land and what area you're gonna get. Man, that would make me right hot if I was one of the little lower guys down there. Hey man, y'all man. First of all, you had to divide our land, and now they casting lots over, man. What's wrong with y'all heads of the tribes, man? I'm going over there with Judah. I'm about to go hang out with Judah. Hey, so in other words, they had to basically kind of give up, not give up, because that's a poor choice of words. That their own decision making that they had now fallen back to where it was.
Sometimes they really got. You ever heard of Urim and Thummim? Urim and Thummim, the priest woman, the garments, to help them make decisions on certain issues with the nation of Israel. Yeah, it was two the jewels that they would have in there. And it's like casting lots, you know, and they would kind of have to make decisions. Oh,
And,
Urim and Thummim.
and as we know, that the priest Joshua and the tribal leaders was the ones that was with the heads. This is still kind of in that line. All right, so after the casting lots, the city was divided up. Now I know I got down at 21:9, but I also have continuations in my book. So if we want to keep rolling, I could take us all the way to 22:10:4, and we can end it there. But let's talk a little bit about the cities of refuge. You remember the cities of refuge? Way back. I think I had the pleasure of talking about the cities of refuge a while back, and we talked about how the cities were going to be set up inside of the lands, and it was for the manslayer,
Mhm.
the person who killed unwillingly. It was a place for them to go and
It'd be within one day's travel distance.
say again.
So they give prior judgment.
Right. Now, there are things that, as we see, that Joshua is making, well, he was commanded to do it because God told him to. And it's very peculiar that when God is setting up the land, that he's thinking of someone who commits an act accidentally and still giving them a place where they could be, a place where they can live, a place where they can stay, a place where they can come to terms with what's happening, and then eventually go back to the land they came from once the coolness of the Avenger had calmed down and they can reasonably deal with it.
I think one of the examples about it was when the man was using the axe,
Mm-hmm.
and the axe head came up accidentally and killed another man. And then he went to that place to, you know, because people was out to kill him.
Mhm.
And if he didn't stay inside that city, decided to go wandering around, you know, he can get killed.
And
He had
the-
to stay there.
And they had to stay there. He had to stay there until at least the high priest died.
That's you know,
And then he was acquitted, basically.
and with that understanding, you know, when they even got to the city, they kind of had to do like a request to get in.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm a manslayer, and can I come in your city? They had to confess to even come into the city.
And see, there was we can say a stopgap there. Even if they had done something that wasn't accidental, they
Mhm.
came in there and went before the priest. And if they found out that they were guilty of it, they were sent back
Put 'em out.
outside to the family.
Now, that's how the city of refuge worked. And they had different places and different things and parts of the city. Now, as I would go out into the field, we would have different people, and it was always said, you know, in medical, I would always have to survey the field and tell people how to set certain things up. And it was said, don't put the porta john next to the chow hall. That was one of the things I always had to tell people. Don't nobody want the
For
porta
some
john
reason.
close to the chow hall. But yet, for some reason, every time it happened, I always been in Corman. I say, go to the commander. Hey, sir, you got to move the porta johns. Oh, what's wrong, Doc? You're too close to the chow hall. Now, I say that because Nathaniel and Philip, they were having a conversation. And Nathaniel was like, hey, Philip was like, hey, come join me. And he said, where are we going? He said, we're going to see Jesus. Where are you from? Galilee. And what was his reply?
Nothing good.
Now, one of these cities in the beginning was very, 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 in fact, I'm very, 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 very close would be an understatement. It was actually one inside of Galilee, which if you have a city that is a refuge for manslayers, people who committed crimes. Now, I'm not saying they're guilty. However, they have done wrong, which means the tension of that city is probably not easy, because you being a native of that city, seeing somebody come into your city, the first thing you're going to say is, that person probably killed somebody. And then that city's tension is heightened because of that person. That person might not get the same, you know, so the city itself kind of have a bad air. Now, I'm from Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is a beautiful city. It has a lot of, now I tell people Philadelphia is one of the most historic places in America, but a lot of people don't like going there because you know what they say? But the crime there is horrible. But I say it's a nice city, good food, good restaurants, but the crime there is horrible. So reading that, going back, now I understand what Philip kind of was, when Nathaniel was kind of saying when he said, does anything good come out of Galilee? it makes sense to study what this conquest was doing for the future. And now you can understand why when people when you see Jesus and everybody's saying, Jesus of Nazareth, he's coming out of Galilee, looking like the people who come out of Galilee are murderers. Is he returning after the high priest's death? Is this somebody that we need to be wary of? How do we receive this person? Does anything good come out of Galilee? I would have never caught that if you didn't do a deep study to put it all together. Because a lot of people see that question, they say, oh, why would Nathaniel say something like that? There you go. You got the history. And it makes sense because would a king come out of there? But guess what touched that part of Galilee?
Judah.
Oh man, you see how Judah worked? Is he everywhere? It's everywhere. So I'm not going to erase the board. 7:30. You all want to wrap it up, or I got two more. Okay, all right. So I know this isn't up there. If you want to take this down quickly with your notes, we got the cities close to Galilee, chapter 21, 1 through 45. And in 21, 1 through 45, if you want to put this in your notes, the Levites received their inheritance. Aaron and his children all came to pass. Those are three little things that I got here. Now, the Levites, after all of the division of the big land, the Levites finally got their portion. Well, not their portion. Their portion was actually in the other tribes' land. So it was a Levite in there. And that even had a reason, a justification. Right? It was because in every land they needed a priest.
Right.
So as the Levites got put in their land, you see the priests, and we see throughout the scriptures, different priests coming from different areas to fulfill different missions, different prophets coming from different areas, the different things coming from different areas. So we see that part right there. And these priests were descendants of Aaron. They're Aaron's children. And I say all came to pass because we still have people when you talk to them and they talk of the promised land, and an actual understanding of what is promised, what is given, what is completed, what is fulfilled. At that last part, I believe it's 45. The very last of 21:45. Can somebody read that for me?
21:45. Not one of the good promises which the Lord had made to the house of Israel failed. All came to pass.
So we do have a religious group of people who still believe that they are cursed. They are under certain, different things, that the promises that God made in Deuteronomy, that the promises that were made to Joshua, they weren't fulfilled. But scripture tells us so, that promise was fulfilled. And when we talk to people, a lot of people, they still harp where we're going through this, we're being tortured, we're being tormented because of this. No, that promise has been fulfilled. Now, after that conquest is where we're going to see a new set of, old set of, and line set of, a reiteration of do's and don'ts. And that's when we get to Joshua when he's later on in the scriptures. 22, 1 to, I'm ahead again. Nope, that was all 25. All right, and 22, 1 through 9. I have in my headers is all is done, because we see that it's fulfilled. Take rest, head home to the other side. That was for the two tribes, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were
2.5 tribes.
The 2.5 tribes. I would say 2 tribes, 2.5 tribes. They were given their rest, and they were told, hey, we've done what we said we were gonna do. If you 2.5 tribes want to go back, go back. And they went. But they go, right? He said, but be warned. He warned them and sent them off with a blessing. Joshua warned them and sent them off with a blessing. Anybody know what that warning was?
Verse 5.
Mhm.
Verse 5. Yeah, go ahead.
Only be very careful to observe the commandment and the law which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you. To love the Lord your God and walk in all his ways and keep his commandments and hold fast to him and serve him with all your heart and with all your soul.
So y'all going back over the river. Don't forget what I'm telling you. Be warned. Guard it. Because y'all not going to be over here with us. Y'all going to be over on the other side. I don't know what's on the other side. We know we conquested over here. We know what's ahead of us, forward, around us. On that other side, we was coming out of wilderness. There was things behind us. If you choose to go back there, keep in mind this thing for your kinsmen, your brothers. Treat them the same. Don't be over there by yourself, wilding out, doing all types of crazy stuff. Don't do that. Take this with you. They went. All right.
They went right back across the Jordan.
Right. Ain't
Right,
nobody.
right past the rocks,
Mhm.
the stones,
And
and they had to swim back across.
and I was about to say, ain't nobody parted the second time. But he also blessed them. You
Yes,
know?
he blessed.
He did not just send them off. He sent them off with a warning, but he also blessed them. And it was the blessing was that message. All right. Now, this is the last part. If you want to take this last note, 22, 10 through 34. I have built an altar,
Mhm.
infighting already, called rebels in an unclean land. Remember Achan. We didn't want to do that again. God knows and he judges. It's a generational reminder. And I'm going to speak onto those points and then I'll wrap it up. All right. So when they went across, the half tribes, they said, well, we're across the river. They got their stones over there. So we want to set up stones over here. We want to set up a monument. Now, and as you read the text and you go in it, you see that monument setting up, it caused a little tension. It caused enough tension for the other tribes to say, well, I guess we got to go kill them. Because if you read the text, they got together fighting men, right?
Mhm.
They didn't just come to talk. They was coming because they were still in an annihilation mode. And that annihilation mode did not stop just with them. But we start to see just how them going across that river caused some infighting already. And that infighting went way down throughout history to where it actually led them to captivity.
Because the infighting was because it was unclean land.
Right.
Yeah, it was unclean, because they transversed through it, went across the Jordan. Jordan was the promised land, but yet they went back over to unclean land and was setting up an idol, not idol, but an altar on unclean land.
And that was the understanding of the people on the other side of the river. And you see how you got two different mindsets because you separate. They thought this land is unclean. You guys went over there and built a whole new altar to whatever God it was. And we don't do that. We believe in the Lord. You over there and the people over the 2.5 tribes said, whoa, wait, it's too many of y'all. Don't come to fight. Let God be the judge, because that's not what we're doing. We didn't do this as a place for slaughter and offering. We did it as a place of remembrance. So later on down the line, when we don't know each other anymore, as time permits, and the people on that side, they look at the rock and say, oh, the people on this side, they have Gilgal, this place set up for stones. They are Israel. The people on the other side, the 2.5 tribes, said, no, we didn't do that. We did it so the people on this side will also know that we are Israel. And that way the two won't fight. But how long did that last? Even with the stones of remembrance, they still had some, they might as well have picked them stones up and threw them at each other. Huh?
Just don't want peace.
Some people just don't want peace. So with that being said, we see that division, by them setting up a different monument, it had to get some understanding amongst themselves. You see that Israel, even though they have conquested, they have won battles, they have had a great leader in place, they have had the mindset, they have been led by the Lord, we still see how just something simple could divide the people to a point where at the end, the priest was like, hey, now that we think about it, we get what you're doing. It's okay. You see, they brought all them people in battle just to turn around and say, you know what? We do understand why you did it. It's okay. So to me, I saw the conflict. I saw the reason on both sides, and that's what, I always tell people that I try to understand both sides of the story before making my decision. And that's a perfect example of seeing the whole story. We have the beauty of seeing the whole story. But if I would have told you just the conquest and them going back across the river with the mindset of the Israelites and say they set this up, then yeah, you probably would be like, yeah, they have a right to. But then if I told you what happened when they got on the other side and the reason for doing it, you'd be like, oh, I understand that too. So that they can, because as time passed, tribal leaders change. And if you never go across the Jordan, eventually you'll forget that they're your cousins, they're your brothers, they're your family. And by them having those stones on that side, and let it be known that we are Israelites. Now, I know we had did some math, and math was beautiful. So we got 12 stones here, 12 stones in the water. And I believe that if they set up the stones the same way, we got 12 stones there.
And 36 stones.
So somehow we end up getting to 36 stones. Ain't math great?
Good.
So the way it goes is this: obedience, remembrance, connection. And those are the 36 stones of Joshua. And that's all I got to say for this week. I thank y'all for letting me
Did
any
the
questions?
Levi's set up on the other side too?
I believe they stayed on the side they were supposed to.
Okay, because they were supposed to get a portion of all the inheritance of all the tribes.
But that wasn't part of the heritage. I would have to go back and look. I don't want to.
No, I just asked the question.
I'm gonna have to go look.
Okay.
Part of the other tribes inheritance, but they was everywhere, so they was the Levites, they had the ministry for all the tribes. But it wasn't their inheritance.
So the best way to understand how the Levites is to me, and maybe this might. So the Levites were set apart, put in place. So if your tribe had here, right, and you have this big circle, the Levites could have been anywhere in there. They were moving about in there.
Right.
They didn't have a particular home. That's when you hear the upper room. That room was reserved for if a priest came. It was a place for them to lay. And a lot of times that upper room, once I went back and looked at it, room was about
only so big.
Yeah, it wasn't big. It had some hay up there. You know, they ate because they weren't supposed to have any possessions.
Right.
And the reason why is because service was supposed to be given unto the Lord.
Right.
They had the 10 and land and flock land that was taken from that. I think Justin said it once best, like with every Marine unit, you got corpsmen.
Right.
For Pacific Mission, you know, and their mission was different from the Marines, but yet they was with them. So the Levites was the same way. You remember saying it a while back, right? Yeah, they was the same way. They was among all the tribes.
Right. Among all the tribes, I was just asking, did they happen to go back on the other side with them? That's the question.
And I would say yes.
I'll look it up.
I would say yes,
Yeah, okay.
because the Levites were
For
Israel as
so
a
they
whole.
would have
So
to.
even though they went over on the other
Right.
side, Israel was
Right.
still
Right.
God's chosen people.
Right.
Whatever's now, granted, if they had to go over to the other side, it probably was with some strife. They a little swimming, a boat ride, you know, some wading in the water, but
In the decision not to fight each other too, because.
Right.
Levites knew people tribe. The priest had to be in each
right.
tribe.
The mindset was there. So if I had to answer it without, I would have to say yes. Levites was everywhere. That perfect analogy was a corpsman. I would go out with people and they'd be like, "Hey man, you part of the wing?" I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm also part of the Navy. Like, I'm with you, but I'm not with you. Don't get it confused. When you start doing crazy stuff, I'm gonna go over here." And I had countless Marines doing countless crazy things, and they would always try to take me with them. I pull my Navy card out. So you can imagine the Levites when things were getting heavy. they had hey, y'all fighting now. My inheritance is God. I'm up out of here.